Hello, this is Zoe, and today I'm going to talk to you about the recent nuclear test North Korea has been conducting. I'll also explain how nations like the US, Japan, and China reacted, how the UN delivered its penalties, and how it will affect this country and the rest of the world, and current events. Have fun looking at my doodles. So, to start off, here are some basic facts about North Korea. I'm sure all of you have heard a lot about its neighbor to the south, South Korea. This is due to the fact that it is close friends with the US and is a democratic capitalist state, while North Korea, basically the opposite. North Korea's capital is Pyongyang, and it borders China to the north. It is a communist state, which completely trashed to the US-backed South Korea capitalist state. Both countries are very different. The reason these countries are so different is due to the Korean War, which is so insanely complicated and hard to explain, so here's the abridged version of the abridged version. At one point, Korea was actually one unified state, and then World War II messed everything up. So by the end of it, it was split into the US back south and the USSR back north. At the time of World War II, the US and USSR were allies, but then the Cold War hit, resulting in an ideology clash between the two countries, and also causing the Korean War. North Koreans believe the war was started by the Americans threatening to invade them, and South Koreans and a lot of other nations believe that the North invaded first into the South. But either way, lots of fighting and bad stuff happened, the USSR fell, and the Korean War ended basically at the 38th parallel, right where they started. This still leads to a lot of distrust between the countries today, both wanting to reunify under their own government. The reason I'm making you sit through this boring history lesson is this is basically the root of the conflict between both North and South Korea, and this is the only way to really explain the tension that the two countries share today. So now that the awkward history lesson's out of the way, let's get to the real current events. On September 2nd, North Korea tested its 5th underground nuclear test, another step towards their goal of making a nuclear warhead. The explosion created a 4.8 magnitude earthquakes. Oh no, shakes everywhere. However, this is a large improvement compared to their first nuclear test in 2006, which created a much smaller tremor. North Korea loves promoting this growth on its state-run news and even international news, and the regime itself claims that they can build a warhead to mount on an intercontinental missile. However, North Korea hasn't actually ever flight tested a long-range missile, and officials and analysts in the region generally doubt that it's ever built a reliable ICBM. But recent research in Seoul has been changing. They now believe that North Korea may be able to mount a nuclear warhead on a short-range Scud or a medium-range Rodong missile, if not on an ICBM. Pyongyang said that its January 6 nuclear test was a hydrogen bomb, kablooey, which could have been a major escalation in its capacity for destruction. However, the thing is, the claim can't really be verified because of its Juche philosophy of self-reliance and basically refusing to trade and communicate with the outside world. So, analysts in Washington generally doubt these claims. This is all increasing lots of tension in the region, and North Korea's isolation and aggression is definitely not helping. So, how did other countries react to this? Well, sadly, nuclear threats like this from North Korea aren't exactly that uncommon. Since North Korea's nuclear program was already sort of a problem in the region, the UN and the US were already delivering sanctions and were ready to give more if the program got too big. So, what are sanctions? In short, they're a penalty on a country, political measures taken to express disapproval or displeasure at a certain action through diplomatic and political means, rather than affecting economic or military relations. Though, as you can see in the picture, North Korea really hasn't cared that much about these, and this might be a problem. South Korea's Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn called an emergency meeting with High Security Council because, needless to say, they were not amused by their neighbors. However, one country that had an interesting reaction was China. Now, normally the US and China disagree on a lot of things, like land claims in the South China Sea, forms of government, trade, international relations, and more. However, China actually scolded North Korea, supporting the UN sanctions. Even though China and North Korea aren't really allies, it actually really isn't in their best interest if there was a war, and the North got taken over by the US-backed South Korea. Japan is the US's closest ally in Asia, and they did not take to this well either. Shinzo Abe, their prime minister, said that if a test had been conducted, It simply cannot be justified. He added that he had instructed government security analysts to collect as much information as possible and share it with the US, South Korea, China, and Russia. Even without North Korea, however, tensions in the region are pretty high. So how effective will these new sanctions be? Sanctioning North Korea for their nuclear tests isn't a new idea. The US, UN, EU, Netherlands, UK, Switzerland, Australia, Canada, China, Hong Kong, Japan, New Zealand, Singapore, and even more countries have imposed sanctions on North Korea from as early as 2007. The thing is, North Korea is a special case when it comes to dealing with these penalties. With their isolationist policies, combined with their dictatorship government, the regime completely ignores the actions and continues on their own interest developing weapons anyway. Despite what North Korea's government may want you to think, it is an impoverished country affected by famine and in most parts isn't very developed other than the capital. If you looked at a map of North Korea from space, you can see how there are virtually no lights compared to its southern neighbor. Now, this may be a personal opinion of mine, so you can react to this with a grain of salt. I think these added sanctions aren't actually going to work, as they haven't been shown to be that effective in the past, and will only have hurt the innocent population more instead of the government. I think that we should begin thinking of a different approach to this. However, another issue is the US uses sanctions so frequently that they might work this time around. They've worked other places in the world. Some other points of view might even say that North Korea has a right to nuclear weapons, considering the fact that the US has many more firepower, and that they might be hypocrites for saying that other countries can't have quite the nuclear arsenal. So, what do you think? What do you think of North Korea's actions? Are sanctions an effective way of penalizing North Korea? Does the US have a right to punish North Korea for their nuclear weapons when they have many more of their own? These are all things to think about it by the end of the day. Thanks for watching.